All right, we're good to go? All right, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to Tripwires and Triggers. Now, this is our first time live on YouTube, so just bear with us. We're going to work through some technical issues and everything else, but I think it's very important to discuss what we're going to talk about today and start having these on a routine basis. So you can find us daily on tripwiresandtriggers.com. We also post every single day what we call a sit rep or a situational report, which lets you know what's happening at your border and how what's happening directly affects you regarding transnational crime, Mexican cartels, and human smuggling organizations and how they're operating. Now, what we're going to start doing is every Friday doing these live events. So for those of you just coming on, I hope that you'll follow us. And remember, everything we do is based on subscription, donation, so please go to tripwiresandtriggers.com. We've got apparel there, all the new stuff, and every purchase helps us out here. Now, today I'm going to start with a quick story. Then I'm going to go into the evolution of the Mexican cartels as to what we see today. And then from there, I'm going to go and we'll do some Q&A if we have some time left, and then close out from there, all right? So with that, let me start with a quick story real quick, because when we talk about the border, it is much more than just an immigration issue. That's one layer. So 2004, I'm a DPS narcotics sergeant down in Brownsville, Texas. Get called to the checkpoint down at the border. When I get there, there are two individuals that have been arrested for about 250 pounds of weed. Nobody wanted it because it's under the federal threshold. So I said, sure, we would be happy to take it. And while I'm there, this young Border Patrol agent comes running into the office, and he is absolutely distressed. He's holding in his arms this 2 to 3 year old little girl she's just precious. She is screaming as loud as she can, and she is covered in mud from about the top of her head all the way down part of her face and across her little body. And he is bouncing her like a basketball. So it is very clear to me right then and there he has no children. So I walk over to him. Now understand, I'm a narcotics agent at this point. You know, I'm rocking my 1980s mullet, you know, because I'm in narcotics, and that's just what you do, right? Got this long goatee that's pretty nasty looking, rocking my 1980s earring, and looking pretty shabby. I walk up to the agent, or to the Border Patrol agent, and I said, hey man, are you okay? And as I reach my arms out, I'll never forget the look on this little girl's face. She went from screaming loud to screaming even louder. And I got her, and I got her close to me, and I got her calmed down. And I looked at the agent, and I said, what's going on? And he said, man, he said, I was down at the water, and he said, I could see something coming from the Mexico side toward the U.S. side. And as he began paralleling it a little bit, what he realized is that he was seeing something flapping in the water, but he couldn't tell exactly what it was. But then he realized what he's seeing is a coyote smuggling a coyote is a smuggler swimming across the river with this little girl whose arms are around the smuggler's neck, and it's her legs flailing in the water. Now, I tell you that because if you've never been to the Rio Grande River, when it gets close to the Gulf of Mexico, the water moves very rapidly and very quickly. So he parallels them, gets it right where they are, and as the smuggler is coming out, just gets his legs on him to stand on the side of the bank still in the water. He looks over, sees the agent, reaches around his back, grabs the little girl, and just chunks her up onto the bank. And that's where she got the mud on her the way she did. She was half in and half out. And the agent immediately ran over there as the smuggler jumps back into the river, swims back toward the Mexico side. The agent picks up the little girl, gets her out of the mud and out of the water. And as he looks, he can see the smuggler going back towards Mexico, but there's a little boy on the other side. He estimated somewhere between 10, 11, somewhere in there, wearing a backpack. So in Spanish, he begins yelling at the coyote, hey, or the smuggler, hey, what's going on here? And as the guy gets to the other side of the bank, as he comes up, he says, I was hired by, in Spanish, I was hired by the family to bring these two across, and basically you have screwed this up. And so the agent, being pretty quick on his toes, he says in Spanish, hey, grab the little boy, come across, I'll move over here to the side, and then I'll try to reunite these two with their family. That way we can keep them together. And I'll never forget what he said just then. Then he says, the smuggler looked at him He looked back down at the little girl. He looked back up, at the little boy, looked back down, looked up, and as he's looking up, he reaches over, he grabs him by the hair, reaches down, grabs his backpack, rips the backpack off of him, throws the boy to the ground. He then throws, you okay? Is it good? Yeah. He then throws the backpack over his shoulder. The little boy gets up, runs one direction, the smuggler slowly walks off in the other. So we gathered up, myself, my partner, and some others, and we went down there and left the little girl there with some other officers, and we went down for a couple hours trying to find that little boy, fearful that he may try to swim across, and unfortunately we never found him. I think about him a lot. And I share that story with you real quick before we start talking about these other issues because, ladies and gentlemen, in the last 4 months alone, there have been 20,273 incidents like what I just described. And I want you to know that law enforcement is affected at every level on what's happening at our border. And remember, the story that I just gave you occurred in 2004. We had the massive influx of people in 2014. But today's not about immigration, but I share that story with you because it is a difficult issue at the border. It affects all of us, and it's not easy. But we're going to talk about the cartels. We're going to talk about criminals and those that never are you really told about. What happens is the news reports on the top layer, which is immigration. But they never talk about the cartels, the human smuggling groups, the human traffickers, etc., who are responsible for some horrible crimes that are occurring that many times the news doesn't get it out to you. So we're going to try to do that now. I want you to know that this discussion affects every one of you. It affects you, it affects your families and your loved ones. And it affects the citizens of Mexico and much broader. And I want to give you an example of that. Now, I've got data in front of me, and if you've got a pen or a piece of paper, go to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. In 2020, from May of 2020 to May of 2019, ladies and gentlemen, 81,230 American citizens died from drug overdoses in this country. Now, we have never been here, not even close. And for those of you that can remember the crack epidemic in the 80s, I'm looking at the data here. We were at just around 12,000 overdose deaths in the late 80s from crack. We aren't even close to where we are now. It is a quantum leap in death upon our citizens. Now, we're not the only ones being afflicted with this. The Mexican citizens are also being afflicted with cartel violence. And you can almost see the parallels in death in the U.S. with drugs from murders in Mexico. From 2007 to 2020, the country of Mexico has had 264,746 deaths in Mexico. Now that stat is coming from CIGAB, which is their country's statisticians that keep up with that data. That is a lot of deaths for that country. But it is fixable. And I want you to know that everything we're talking about today is fixable. And I'm going to give you some solutions to the problems as we've been working on this for the last 4 years. Now, when you talk about a cartel, a lot of people will say, and you hear this in the news all the time, it drives me crazy, that a cartel is a gang. That is absolutely fundamentally false. It's not even close. A gang in the United States may claim they have control of a corner or they control an area. But at the end of the day, you still have a police chief, you still have a law enforcement agency that works for you, not for a criminal, corrupt organization. Second, they report to the mayor, who is not corrupted. Third, they report to a governor, and beyond all the way up to federal systems that we have. In Mexico, it's different. When you start talking about the cartels, everyone at every level in some of these plazas are completely corrupted, from the state, from the comandante and the police levels, to the state, to the federal, to even the mayors and the governors. Now look, you can look it up. Just type in how many governors have been arrested in Mexico in the last 5 years. The numbers are really pretty incredible. And I've been on Title III investigations. Those are investigations where you're listening through your ears to cartel bosses as generals within the military in Mexico call in and say, okay, I'm heading in now. I'm going to be your new general in this area. When do you want to discuss the price, the peso, or the tax, so that they can continue to operate? This is just how it works. But you aren't usually told that. Now, when you think about the word cartel, today it's really been bastardized. But it's nothing more than an agreement between one smuggling group and another to work together. And if you think of these big cartels like Sinaloa and Cartel Jalisco New Generation, that's exactly what they are. They're different groups that really work closely together. A cartel today is not what it was 10 years ago. Today, Sinaloa is in over 54 countries around the world. Cartel Jalisco New Generation is in over 48 countries. So it's not a U.S.-Mexico issue. That's what you're still told. It is not. We've been beyond that for many, many years. It is a global issue, and it affects all of us. So we're going to talk about that. Let's break it down just a little bit here. What is, how do the cartels operate? Well, you have capos. Capos, those are the godfathers. They make all the money, but they don't really call the day in, day out shots. They're living their lives doing what they do, but they have cells that operate and run their organizations. These organizations are run mostly like a Fortune 500 company as your organization gets much larger. You have regional heads that control multiple countries. You have divisional heads who control, multiple large geographic areas and work out how the organization functions day in, day out. And you have gatekeepers. Now, gatekeepers are a very important part of this because when the plaza is under control of the local gatekeeper, that individual handles all legitimate and illegitimate traffic that move through the plaza, and all of it is taxed. And they are taxing it using sicarios and different groups along with law enforcement and others to help them keep control and be able to tax this. It's how they make so much money very rapidly, very quickly. And that's a very important point that the gatekeepers, this is really the start of the big money. Now, when you think of sicarios, sure, some make good money depending upon which organization, and they're all different. The Zetas, when we were going after them, they were a very hierarchical organization. The reason they were that way is because look at where they came from. They were paramilitary. They came from the GAFE. And they ran in very organized, disciplined structure, which was a major game changer to how the cartels historically operated when they called themselves the company. When you talk to the old guys today, they still call themselves that. But sicarios today are really much younger, much more, even when you talk to the old guys today, they have no respect for these guys anymore. I mean, they're just killing machines for the most part, high on drugs and other things. But they still receive a lot of training in basic, intermediate, and advanced courses, depending upon which cartel you're talking about, as to the level of capability they have. Now, you have female sicarios as well. They're known as medusas or panteras. And then you have halcons, or falcons, the lookouts. They are everywhere. Along your southwest border, they absolutely operate. I've seen them as far as 30 miles into the U.S. operating on two-way handheld encrypted radios. And they truly check on and check off just like law enforcement in the United States. And it is 24/7, 365. It never shuts down. We've done a lot of analysis as to when is the best day, best time to seize drugs, that sort of thing. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with when there is a gap in the river where law enforcement is not there, they will shoot that gap. They always have drugs backed up, or they always have guns and money backed up on the U.S. side needing to cross. And that's the way it really works. And it is real time, and it is very dynamic. I mean, it is hard to really articulate here just how efficient and effective they are. I mean, think about it. When you do it every single day, 7 days a week, you get very good at doing something. And they have as well. Now, when we talk about how the structures are, each cartel is different. But they are run very much like a Fortune 500 company, and you have different logistical cells in there. You have operational cells, that's the command and control. Within that operational cell, you've got coordinating efforts, you've got purchasing, you've got acquisitions, all of that. And then within the enforcement cells, within the Aztecas, you have the handling of collection, the protecting of the plaza and the leadership. You have various different types of kidnapping, security measures, counter-surveillance operations, the murders and threats and all of that stuff, and the operational side of things. Very effective, very, very effective, and every day getting better at their tradecraft. You then have the logistical cells. Now this one, for any of you out there who are within the community, this is the one you want to target. I've been doing this a very long time. The logistical cells are the ones where you're going to win. Going after their technicians who handle their radios, which is really the lifeblood of the organizations. You've got transportation, distribution cells, but you also have accountants and attorneys. And what you'll find within these organizations are they're very close to the bosses. They're very close to the capos. Now the last one is the propaganda cell, and that's what I want to spend a little time on here, because propaganda is something that I think is not really realized, especially as social media and the cartels have just gone crazy in the last few years. It's very common for them to blame a rival cartel for some kind of activity. Their propaganda cells are very effective. Give you an example. Many of the journalists in Mexico are paid on the cartel dime to flip the narrative and change it a little bit based on the horrific crimes they commit. I know of one cartel that's paying $750 a week to journalists in Mexico to make sure they write what they want. YouTube, banners, propaganda, civil rights and civil liberties groups are all on the PISO, or they don't operate there. That's just the way it works. And that part and that depth is not really explained to you, the folks, how they control and manipulate. And you got to remember, when you're making $8 billion a year, you've got a lot of money and assets to control what you want to control. So the insurgency began in 2006. This is when President Nieto came into power and began to use his military to go after the cartels. And we were stunned because, one, we thought it was very odd that this was happening, but what we didn't realize at the time is just how law enforcement was so degraded within the Mexican government at every level, federal, state, and local back then. I can remember being on Title III's listening as you had officers who were pulled over by the cartel and had no bullets in their guns. They were broke. And lack of training, et cetera. That has changed tremendously now as the government of Mexico went after the cartels for many, many years. But there was a real pushback from the cartels to battle, and that's where we saw this thing spread. By 2009, the Los Zetas, who had been an enforcement wing of the Gulf Cartel, had decided to go on their own way and to do their own thing and split away. Tony Tormenta was not a very good leader, but they were extremely loyal to the Gulf Cartel. That is not what's talked about by these so-called experts who've never debriefed a cartel member or built a program to go after them. I was a lieutenant in Laredo in the DPS Narcotics Services over two major drug squads as this war broke out in Nuevo Laredo, and the violence that came across was incredible. We were stopping kidnappings before they were going back, because when the cartels go to war, it affects both sides of our border, just as it is right now in Roma, Texas, where they're battling for control of Miguel Alemán. But the Zetas' hyper-violence spread across Mexico, and it affected the other cartels. And this should have been a major tripwire to the United States government. That what was being seen in Tamaulipas and within the Zetas was going to spread very rapidly, as we see today, because it really did. Now all the cartels had to raise their capability to be able to meet the threat faced by the Zeta cartel. And then by 2011, we really began to see the evolution into terrorism. It was some horrible cases. If you get a chance, look up the San Fernando massacre. San Fernando was a horrible incident. You had 72 migrants just trying to make a better life for themselves executed by the Z's. The Zetas, again, went into another territory, killed those 72 people to get the government of Mexico to go after Cartel de Golfo, when really we would all learn that it was the Zetas who had done that. That's a prime example. Look up the Allende massacre. 300 family members and people from a small community of Allende, Mexico. That's Allende. Absolutely just missing overnight. An incinerator was found where basically bodies were burned. So far, 60 have been identified through DNA. The others are just completely missing. There's some great reporting that has been done on that in the past by reporters. Monterrey, Mexico, you had 53 people killed. I remember this very well. We had sources on the ground right after this incident occurred very quickly and rapidly. Killed 53 people, all because the owner of the casino in Monterrey refused to pay Miguel Trevino and the Z's the piso or the tax. So they sent these sicarios in there who firebombed the place, and 53 people were in the back where they died of smoke inhalation, most of them. Horrible, horrible crimes. This is really that transition into terrorism. The other thing that began to happen was the evolution of tradecraft. We began to see a lot of changes there. The implementation of vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices like you saw in Juarez in 2010. Then by the end of the year, we had 4 more by different cartels. So that evolution began happening very rapidly and quickly. And now, across the country, and every cartel possesses that ability today. So the tradecraft really got better. The other thing is armored vehicles. I remember in 2009, I was a captain now in the Border Security, in the Intel and Counterterrorism Division in the State Fusion Center. As we began to see these large monsters, as they're called. And these are armored vehicles that just, they were dump trucks with metal plates welded to them. And I remember thinking, how in the world do you stop those damn things? I mean, they're huge. We were debriefing a guy one time. He said, "Oh, it's no problem." He said, "You just run right up to the door seam." He said, "You just open up right in there, and the bullets eventually skip right through and hit the driver." But they have learned since then. You have to remember that they battle every day. If we were sitting right here and we had a guy across from us right now and we were talking, he would say, "We are at war." And what I mean by that is I took Lara Logan first time in June of 2019 to the border, and we were just outside Roma, Texas, at a little area on the border, and we had a lot of cameras up. And they sent some halcones over to try to figure out what the hell was going on over there on the border. And I knew exactly what it was. And Lara started talking to him, and the very first question she asked him, she said, "How are things over there in Mexico?" And I'll never forget the response. The guy says, "Well, we're at war." And as soon as he said that, I stopped the conversation and said, "Did you catch that?" And I say that to you because we have our beliefs of what's going on here, but what matters is what they believe. Not what we think, not what you think. What do they think? And they believe they're at war. And if you see the level of violence occurring over there, they are. I mean, they truly are. These gun battles are massive. If you get a chance, go to our website at tripwiresandtriggers.com, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about, or jasonjones.com. You'll be able to see some of these things. But mobility is life, and they've learned that. They've now gone through over 4 generations of armored vehicles. They've gotten lighter and lighter, and they will tell you that when they battle, that that mobility is life, meaning that speed matters in a gunfight. And so these armored vehicles have gone from these great big heavy-duty ones to these that are now you can barely tell they're armored from the outside. They've got armored facilities. They got welding facilities and facilities where auto shops where they just build armored cars for the cartels. They're really pretty incredible. Now, many will say that the cartels are not foreign terrorist organizations, and they shouldn't be labeled as such. I strongly, strongly disagree as someone who has built programs to go after them. And I will tell you that CNN did a really good piece on this last national election in Mexico. If you'll Google this, you'll find it. You'll be able to read it. It says 132 politicians, candidates, and staffers murdered in Mexico from 2017 to 2018. And I hope you'll look that article up. It was really well done. What it articulated is that during the last national election in Mexico, 132 people had been killed that were linked to running for office or helping that process out. And so when you think today of the cartels and where they are much smarter than Middle East terrorists, in my opinion, because they use the criminal justice system in Mexico and their lawyers to skirt the laws. They're very smart and very effective. Problem is, the American government is not smart enough to figure that out yet. But we're getting there. We're getting them there. After 4 years, we're getting them there. Final transition from terrorism into where we are today. You may have heard some of this, and it's called a parallel government. If you look at what has happened in Mexico, in Jalisco, and Sinaloa, at the level and breadth of these cartels are extremely, extremely strong. Everything is corrupted through there, and that's where this term parallel government now comes from. You have every level of officials corrupted by these cartels there. So in June of 2015, May 1st of 2015, Operation Jalisco commenced. Look that up if you will. It's very interesting. When it happened, the Mexican government used their special forces in Sedena and others to go after El Mencho, the head of the CJ&G. Now, this was at this time still a very young cartel. It had only been around since about 2011 or so. And as they moved in, the helicopters were shot down with RPGs and light anti-tank weapons. And the mission was a complete failure. They never got El Mencho and didn't even get close to him. But at the same time, they conducted 39 roadblocks throughout the state of Jalisco. Jalisco is a beautiful place. I mean, it's a beautiful state. Very high-end homes and families. So you can imagine, as 25 municipalities throughout that state were affected, 4 major clashes, 19 arrested, 7 dead, 19 wounded, including 13 federal forces of the military and others. 26 public transportation routes and 12 highways were affected, including 10 banks and 12 gas stations completely burned to the ground. And one of the things you'll see in this operation, if you look it up, and many others, is they will use semi-truck tractors along with buses and other large vehicles to block roadways, and then they set them afire. That's a common tactic used across Mexico in order to slow down ground forces so that it allows their leadership to get away. Remember, everything is watched and known in these plazas, so they're able to conduct and combat operations. But one of the things that really happened here that's not discussed a lot is that El Mencho reached out to the president of Mexico at the time, who was Nieto, and said, if you do this again, we will come for you in Mexico City. Now, that's not talked about. What you usually hear is that was the beginning of CJ and G being the most violent cartel. I strongly disagree with that. It was not the beginning of it. It was just another evolution that was missed by the U.S. government. The other thing that I would tell you here is that what is happening in Mexico affects all of us. It is not just a Mexico problem. Many of you are probably saying to yourself, okay, Jason, that's great, but that problem is down there. No, it's not. It is here as well. If you get a chance, look up May 23rd, 2013, South Lake, Texas, where a cartel attorney was killed just outside Dallas. That's May 23rd, 2013, South Lake, Texas, where Beltran Leyva organization spent almost $1 million to locate him in the U.S., send a cell in to find him, and as he and his wife pulled into the outdoor mall in South Lake, Texas, which is, by the way, is just outside Dallas, and it's a very upscale environment. As they parked, a crew pulled up behind him, blocked him in. He was not even out of the passenger seat. His wife was driving when a Sicario ran up, fired into the vehicle, returned to the vehicle, jumped in, and they took off in a matter of seconds. It was an unbelievable hit. And look, I can do these all day. March 16th, 2015, South Padre Island, body found floating in South Padre with no head. That's a clue, right? Something wrong. Who was responsible? A Border Patrol agent and a cell of Sicarios and a crew who had been working directly for the Gulf Cartel in Mexico. Executed and decapitated him. The head was never found. June 7th, 2018, please look this up. It's a horrible, horrible crime. June 7th, 2018, Sinaloa cartel kills and beheads a 13-year-old autistic Alabama girl in Alabama, and killed her grandmother as well, who was believed to be a smuggler for the Sinaloa cartel. And look, I can just keep going through these on and on and on, but what I would tell you is that crimes are happening here. So let's talk about solutions. Why is it that crimes are happening here but you don't hear about it? And you just keep hearing about these southern states saying we got problems, whether it's a governor or a sheriff. You know, and for decades now, if you really think about it. We've got problems, we've got problems. And then people in the north going, but we don't see it. No one's lying to you. You're really not. And the reason you don't see it is because of a system known as the Uniform Crime Report, or what is called UCR. It was created in 1929, implemented in 1934, and is currently under the FBI and has been since then. So let me just share with you what is judged every year by crime going up and down. Murder, manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated robbery, burglary, theft, larceny, and motor vehicle theft. Now, most would say, well, Jason, that kind of covers it. But let's talk about every crime that I've shared with you today that is not covered. And this is going to stun you. Public corruption, kidnappings, extortions, drug trafficking. Ladies and gentlemen, this country has been in a supposed drug war for 40 plus years, and yet 18,000 agencies across this country don't capture the data because the system isn't equipped to do it. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, human smuggling, and there is a difference between human trafficking and human smuggling. Money laundering, weapons seizures, cyber crimes, and the list goes on. And I say that to you because of this. It's not this side, that side. It is a system that is broken and outdated. The FBI should be held absolutely accountable for this level of failure. Now, in 2021, they're supposed to go to a newer system called NIBRS. NIBRS is called the National Incident-Based Reporting System, if you're not familiar with NIBRS. And it's going to capture 52 new index crimes, which is great. That's fantastic. But here's the kicker. The damn thing was created in 1984, implemented in 88. It's what, 36 years old now? It's insanity. Now look at NYPD. NYPD uses CompStat. They use data overlaid with intelligence to drive operations. That one agency is really the go-to agency in this country now, because what they've done is they use data for everything they do. And for those of you that are from New York that are on right now, I just want to tell you one thing, and that is that New York, many of you can remember when New York, we called it the dirty apple, right? And today, you had 2,100 plus murders back then a year. Today, less than 350 sustained. Now, crime is going up recently, that is true. But under Ray Kelly and Bernard Carrick, what they created is absolutely incredible. And Bratton too, in fairness. Those are the commissioners of New York. So changing the data set so that everyone can understand it real time and how it affects our country is key. That is one solution. Second, designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. I can't stress to you how bad this is needed. Now, that doesn't mean going to war with them. It allows for the tools of national power by authority and by priority to focus on the cartels. And this makes all agencies, local, state, federal, DOD, and the IC, all collaborate, whether they want to or not, to focus on the cartels. But here's the authorities it provides, and this is where it gets really good. So if you're a cartel member, which there are thousands throughout this country, you can deport them immediately. Remember, they have money. They have the ability to get visas to be here. Now they can be removed. We don't have to do these 2-year-long investigations. Second, we can limit their mobility globally because now we can put them on watch lists, and now they can't go mobile to keep up what they're doing. Because you have to remember, today, they're making a lot of money working in Europe, working with Australia, and working in Russia. I mean, I'll give you an example. Cocaine in Australia is going for about 180,000 a kilo right now. So they're making tremendous amounts of money working globally. This is a way to limit their mobility and put them back into Mexico. And I know many of you are saying, no, that's not the solution. The solution is we need to follow the money. I hear this all the time. And what I would really tell you about that is that follow the money investigations are still an investigation. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been doing that for over a decade. But you keep hearing it on the news because these pundits just pick up a term and they just run with it, even though they've never done one. Our system was created for us domestically, and every time we've tried to take on the world's problem, our system has failed for a reason. It's never been designed for that. So now let's talk about if we have the terrorism designation. We can go after their money real time, any accounts anywhere in the world, and I don't have to develop probable cause and work it for 2 years while they pull the money out of one account, put it in another on a weekly basis. That's how you have success. So there are ways of winning in this. Those of us who know exactly how to do it know what needs to be done. And if we do these things, we will win. And I can assure you of that. Now, I'm going to close with that for now. Merlin, do we have any questions or anything you see coming across? Does anybody have any questions you'd like to ask? Any questions? Anybody have anything you want to ask about it all? I'll take a few seconds here just to give you time to type it in and see if there's something you'd like to discuss. We covered, the cartels today, but we can cover the other stuff. We'll be back next week, just so you know. No questions? All right. All right, I'm being told no questions. If we get one comes up, then I'll answer it while I'm still on. I'd like to close with a few things here. And first and foremost, there are a lot of families suffering right now across the nation from the fentanyl epidemic. And there are many things being said about if we didn't have such a drug problem in the United States, then the cartels wouldn't be there. I know many of you have this on your mind right now. I want to address that for just a second. Think about fentanyl. You remember a time when we had fentanyl? Think back for those of you who've been around since the 80s. No, because what the cartels do very effectively is when they take over a drug or they create one and they begin to move it into the country, they blast it across it almost free. And when they do this, they create new addicts, and now they've got them hooked. I can tell you I was with the Houston Methamphetamine Squad in 2005 as Sinaloa meth began just flooding the country, and they were giving it away for free. Addicts at the time didn't even like it. They didn't like the taste of it, and they would tell you that. But this is how the cartel operates, and they will surge with drugs, give it to the country free, and then once they have the addicts, then they pull in. Fentanyl's the same way. We never seized fentanyl on our southwest border until 2015. Now look, it's killing Americans all over this country. And it is a true national security threat. And I want you to know it's fixable. All of this is fixable. And it will all begin when we designate the Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations and fix the Uniform Crime Report.
We have a question. It says, are there any goals of reducing X number of cartels per year?
Are there any goals
Just
of,
once.
reducing any cartels? What was it?
Are there any goals of reducing X number of cartels per year?
No, there are some real problems right now. The country of Mexico, President AMLO, is not going after the cartels. He has a strategy of hugs, not bullets. And while that strategy sounds really well, I can look at the data and show that under his leadership and under, look, at the end of the day, all presidents of every country around the world, they come into power with an agenda and a plan. Some work, some don't. And if you look at the amount of deaths and all, let me go to that real quick. I've got it right here, and I can give it to you data-wise. That way you don't think it's just my perception and feelings, because I don't have many feelings here. We use data. Under President Calderon, at the height of 2012, at the worst part of his leadership, you had 21,728 murders as they took on the cartels. Under President Nieto, at the height of that in 2017, you had 29,168. And over the last 3 years under President AMLO, you've had, in 2018, 33,341 murders. In 2019, you had 35,558 murders, and in 2020, 34,523. So just looking at strategy and not trying to, cast things out against an administration, I look at the data, and the strategy is not working. So what that has limited us with doing is being able to provide critical intelligence to go after the leadership of the cartels, and the data shows us that the strategy being implemented by the Mexican government isn't working for their people, and it isn't working for ours. But great question. Thank you very much. Do we have another? All right. Thank you for the question very much, by the way. For all of you that are on, everything we do is by donation. So please go to tripwiresandtriggers.com. Please donate or buy something. We've got some new apparel on our website. And if you're interested in following us, every day we post on TikTok. We like that tick in the talk thing, man. It's quick, it's fast, and you can follow us. Every day we do 1-minute sit reps to kind of show you what's happened for that day, and that way you can follow us there, and we hope to see you. Now, we're planning every Friday to go live. We don't know what times yet. We're learning this a little better. This is our first one, so I hope this came across okay. But we hope to see you, and we hope that you'll follow us, because this is what helps us to keep getting you what's really happening and how what's really happening at that border is affecting you and your families. It is not just immigration. There's so much more to that. Thank you, and as always, be safe.